You won't believe what happened after Jack Marlowe uncovered the secret behind the vanishing town of Charon's Hollow. The events that followed defy all explanation. Mystery, danger, and an ancient curse all came to light. What would you do if everything you knew about reality started unraveling? Welcome to our YouTube channel. Before diving into this extraordinary tale, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more intriguing stories like this. Now, let's uncover the secrets of Charon's Hollow. Chapter 1: The Assignment. Jack Marlowe, a seasoned journalist with a knack for unearthing the extraordinary, leaned back in the worn leather chair of his editor's office. The room smelled of stale coffee, cigarette smoke, and ink, a potent cocktail that seemed to cling to the walls. Framed headlines, yellowed with age, chronicled the paper's glory days, each one a testament to the tenacity of the newsroom's past. Jack's eyes wandered momentarily over the cluttered desk before settling on Frank Hargrove, the grizzled editor who had called him in. Frank's sharp eyes, perpetually squinting against the cigarette smoke curling around his head, missed nothing. He slid a thin, weathered folder across the desk toward Jack, his cigarette dangling precariously from his lips. The man's gruff demeanor and no-nonsense tone could intimidate most, but Jack had grown accustomed to it over the years. "Ever heard of Charon's Hollow?" Frank asked, his voice gravelly and edged with curiosity. Jack shook his head, intrigued despite himself. "Can't say I have. What's the story?" Frank's lips curled into a smirk, his cigarette bobbing as he spoke. "It's a blip on the map, a tiny town out in the sticks. But here's the kicker. Every full moon, the entire place vanishes. Just disappears into thin air. No one's been able to explain it." Jack raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in his expression. "A vanishing town? Sounds like a hoax to me." "Maybe it is," Frank replied with a shrug, leaning back in his chair. "But if it's not, this could be your Pulitzer. I wanted to check it out." The promise of a groundbreaking story was enough to ignite Jack's curiosity. He pulled a folder closer and flipped it open. Inside, he found a fading map, a few grainy photos, and a collection of cryptic accounts. Witness statements ranged from vague descriptions of ghostly apparitions to chilling tales of strange sounds and whispers that filled the air before the town's disappearance. Jack closed the folder and stood, his decision made. "I'll head out first thing in the morning." Frank gave a satisfied nod, the corners of his mouth twitching upward in a rare smile. "Good. Just don't get yourself killed. I can't afford to lose my best writer." That evening, Jack meticulously prepared for the assignment. He laid out his equipment, a sturdy camera, a reliable voice recorder, notebooks, and a flashlight with extra batteries. The accounts in the folder swirled in his mind, each one stranger than the last. There were mentions of townsfolk vanishing along with the town, spectral lights drifting through the streets, and a pervasive sense of dread that gripped all who visited. By the time he finished packing, the first hints of doubt began to creep in. What if the stories were true? He brushed the thought aside, steeling himself for the task ahead. Whatever lay in Charon's Hollow, he would find the truth. Chapter 2: Arrival. The journey to Charon's Hollow was as foreboding as the accounts suggested. The narrow, winding road snaked through dense forests that loomed on either side, their gnarled branches forming a canopy overhead. The deeper Jack drove, the more isolated he felt. His GPS had long since lost signal, leaving him to rely on the fading map in the folder. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the road grew darker, the shadows stretching and shifting with the dimming light. The crunch of gravel beneath his tires and the occasional rustle of leaves were the only sounds. An oppressive silence seemed to settle over the forest, broken only by the distant call of an owl. Jack's unease grew with every mile. The accounts had ascribed a creeping sense of dread that heralded the town's vanishing, and now he understood what they meant. The air itself felt heavier, the atmosphere charged with an unseen tension. The trees lining the road appeared almost alive, their skeletal forms reaching toward him as if to snatch him from his path. When Jack finally reached the outskirts of Charon's Hollow, he was struck by its otherworldly appearance. The town lay nestled in a remote valley, shrouded in a thick, clinging mist that diffused the light of the gas lamps lining its cobblestone streets. Victorian-style houses, their facades weathered by time, stood in eerie silence. The soft flicker of the lamps cast long, distorted shadows that danced along the pavement. Jack parked his car in front of the local inn, a creaky building with peeling paint and a sign that read Ethel's Rest. The inn was small and unassuming, its wooden porch sagging under the weight of years. As Jack climbed the steps, the boards groaned beneath him, echoing in the stillness of the night. Inside, the inn was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of lavender and old wood. A frail elderly woman emerged from behind the counter, her sharp eyes narrowing as she took in Jack's appearance. "You're not here for the Hollow, are you?" she asked, her voice quivering with a mix of curiosity and fear. Jack offered a disarming smile as he signed the guest book. "I'm a journalist. I'm here to understand what happens on the full moon." Ethel's expression darkened, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her shawl. "Some things are better left alone, Mr. Marlowe. The Hollow, it's not a place for outsiders. Be careful." Despite her warning, Jack's resolve only strengthened. After unpacking his equipment, he sat by the window of his small, sparsely furnished room, gazing out at the mist-shrouded streets. Faint sounds drifted through the air: laughter, the clinking of glasses, the occasional bark of a dog. But beneath the surface of normalcy was an undercurrent of tension, a sense of something unseen and unsaid. As he prepared for the long night ahead, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he had already stepped into the unknown. Somewhere within Charon's Hollow, the answers waited, and he was determined to find them. Chapter 3: First Clues. Jack spent the next day thoroughly exploring the mysterious town of Charon's Hollow, driven by an insatiable desire to uncover the truth behind its eerie reputation. The locals were a reserved and wary group, their words often cloaked in ambiguity. Jack's attempts to engage them in conversation were met with polite but terse responses, and the unease in their eyes spoke volumes. Nevertheless, he persisted, chipping away at their reluctance until a few brave souls began to share fragments of their unsettling experiences. Through whispered accounts and hesitant admissions, a pattern began to emerge. Tales of strange lights that danced across the night sky were common, as were murmurs of shadowy figures glimpsed at the edges of perception. Each story seemed more fantastical than the last, yet the fear in the locals' voices was unmistakable. Jack's notebook quickly filled with scrawled notes, each anecdote adding to the growing sense of foreboding. One particularly chilling story came from Bill, an aging farmer with weathered skin and eyes that seemed to hold decades of unspoken hardships. They met in the town's lone diner, where the air was heavy with the aroma of coffee and grease. Bill spoke in a low voice, leaning across the table as if afraid of being overheard. "It was late," Bill began, his calloused hands gripping his coffee cup tightly. "I'd been out in the fields, fixing the fence. The moon was high, lighting up the whole valley like it was daytime. Then it came, a mist, shimmering like it was alive. It rolled in so fast, I barely had time to react. Covered everything in its path, and when it cleared," he paused, his voice faltering. "The town was gone. Just gone." Jack's pen moved furiously across the page, capturing every word. "Did you see anything else?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chill creeping up his spine. Bill hesitated, his gaze darting toward the window. "It's that well in the square," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's where it starts. Always the well." Intrigued and more than a little unnerved, Jack thanked Bill and made his way to the town square. The well stood at its center, an ancient structure of weathered stone. Its dark openings seemed to exude an air of malevolence, as though it were a portal to something far beyond comprehension. Jack's determination solidified. If the well was the key to Charon's Hollow's mysteries, he intended to uncover its secrets. As night fell, the full moon bathed the town in a ghostly glow. Jack armed himself with his camera, notebook, and flashlight, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. He positioned himself near the well, its moss-covered stones cool to the touch. The square was eerily quiet, the usual hum of nocturnal insects conspicuously absent. Jack's breath formed visible puffs in the cold air as he waited, every nerve in his body on edge. Chapter 4. The Vanishing. The minutes dragged by, each one stretching into an eternity. As the clock struck midnight, a profound stillness descended over Charon's Hollow. The air seemed to thicken, pressing down on Jack's chest. He held his breath, straining to hear any sound that might break the oppressive silence. Then it began. A faint hum resonated through the ground, so subtle at first that Jack thought he might be imagining it. But it grew steadily louder, its vibration rattling the stones of the well beneath his hands. The air turned icy, and Jack shivered despite his heavy jacket. From the corner of his eye, he saw the first tendrils of mist rising from the well. The mist spread quickly, curling and twisting as though it had a life of its own. It shimmered faintly, infused with an otherworldly light that seemed to pulse in time with the hum. Jack raised his camera, snapping photo after photo, his hands trembling. The square was soon engulfed, the well's outline barely visible through the dense fog. The lights in the houses flickered, casting fleeting, distorted shadows across the mist. One by one, they winked out, plunging the town into darkness. Jack's pulse raced as he fought the urge to flee. The mist seemed almost alive, its movements deliberate and purposeful. It crept toward him, and for a moment, Jack felt as though it was studying him. The hum rose to a deafening roar, drowning out all other sounds. The ground beneath Jack's feet trembled violently, and he stumbled, his flashlight tumbling to the ground. He barely managed to steady himself, his eyes fixed on the well. Through the swirling mist, he saw the shapes of houses and trees blur and fade. Then, with a final, blinding flash of light, everything disappeared. When the roar ceased, an eerie silence took its place. Jack found himself standing alone in an empty valley. The town, its people, his car parked by the inn, all of it was gone. Only the well remained, an ominous sentinel in the barren landscape. Its gaping maw seemed darker than before, as though it had swallowed the town whole. Jack knelt beside the well, his flashlight casting a weak beam into its depths. The light was consumed almost immediately, revealing nothing but an impenetrable void. He sat back, his mind racing as he replayed the events in his head. The mist, the lights, the roar. It defied all logic, yet it had happened. He was stranded, alone in a place that should not exist. As dawn's first light crept over the horizon, Jack resolved to stay. The well held answers, he was certain of it. But as he stared into its inscrutable depths, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Somewhere in the distance, a faint, otherworldly whisper carried on the wind, chilling him to the core. The mystery of Charon's Hollow was only beginning, and Jack was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Chapter 5. The Other Side. Determined to uncover the truth, Jack descended into the well, each step carrying him deeper into the unknown. The air grew progressively colder, sending shivers down his spine despite the layers of clothing he wore. The walls of the well seemed alive, pulsing faintly with an otherworldly energy Jack could feel beneath his fingertips. The faint echoes of dripping water accompanied him, creating a rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. After what felt like an eternity, Jack reached the bottom. The narrow confines of the well opened into a hidden chamber, its walls inscribed with ancient symbols glowing faintly in the dim light of his flashlight. The chamber exuded an air of power and mystery, as if it had been untouched for centuries, yet preserved by forces beyond human comprehension. In the center stood a glowing portal, its edges shimmering like the surface of a disturbed pond. Jack's breath caught as he stared at it, certain this was the threshold to the answers he sought. Without hesitation, Jack stepped through. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a feeling of weightlessness mixed with a disorienting pull of being stretched and compressed. When he emerged, he found himself in a mirror image of Charon's Hollow. Yet the town was alive with movement, its inhabitants moving like shadows, their faces blank and expressionless, as if they were echoes of their former selves. Jack wandered the spectral town, his steps echoing faintly in the uncanny stillness. Each figure he passed seemed trapped in a mechanical loop, endlessly repeating actions without awareness. Time itself felt distorted. Jack could not tell whether minutes or hours had passed. The sky above was a swirling vortex of gray and silver, casting an ethereal glow over the town. Eventually, Jack's aimless wandering led him to the edge of the spectral town, where an old, crumbling library loomed like a sentinel. Its doors, heavy and weathered, creaked open as though inviting him in. The interior was vast and cavernous, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and dust. Shelves were packed with ancient tomes and scrolls, their spines adorned with symbols Jack couldn't begin to decipher. One book, larger and more ornate than the rest, caught his attention. Its cover was encrusted with jewels that gleamed faintly in the dim light, and its title was written in an unfamiliar language. As Jack touched the book, the text shifted into English. The Curse of Charon's Hollow. With trembling hands, Jack opened the book and began to read. The story it revealed was both tragic and terrifying. It spoke of Alaric, a sorcerer whose extraordinary powers were sought by many, but feared by all. Alaric had been lured to Charon's Hollow by the townsfolk, who promised him friendship and protection. But their promises were lies. When his abilities began to threaten their control, they turned on him. They burned his home, destroyed his belongings, and cast him out to die. In his final moments, consumed by pain and betrayal, Alaric cursed the town, binding it to his agony. The curse, Jack learned, was cyclical, tied to the phases of the moon. Each full moon, the town shifted into a liminal space, mirroring Alaric's isolation in his final days. The shadowy figures Jack had seen were echoes of the townsfolk, condemned to relive their lives in this alternate realm, their souls forever trapped. In the margins of the book, notes scrawled in a hurried hand spoke of a keeper, a guardian of the balance between realms. The keeper held the knowledge to break the curse, but was hidden deep within the spectral version of Charon's Hollow. Layers of illusions and traps protected the keeper, and reaching them would require courage and cunning. Chapter 6: The Truth. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Jack set out to find the keeper. His mind raced with questions, but the answers lay ahead, hidden in the heart of the spectral town. The streets seemed to shift and rearrange themselves as he moved, transforming the town into a labyrinth designed to confound him. Each turn brought new challenges, and Jack relied on fragments of the book's notes to guide him. The journey was harrowing. As Jack ventured deeper into the spectral town, he encountered spectral guardians, towering figures composed of mist and light. Their forms were ever-shifting, exuding an aura of both power and menace. Each guardian tested Jack's resolve, their voices echoing like thunder as they posed questions that delved into the depths of his character. One guardian, resembling a towering column of mist, spoke directly to Jack. "Why do you seek to break the curse?" it demanded, its voice reverberating through the air. Jack answered truthfully, speaking of his past as a journalist and his desire to uncover the truth. He spoke of the suffering he had witnessed and his belief that even those who had wronged Alaric deserved a chance at redemption. The guardians seemed to consider his words before stepping aside, allowing him to pass. Finally, Jack reached a grand hall at the center of the spectral town. The hall was a masterpiece of otherworldly architecture, its walls adorned with shifting patterns that seemed to tell a story of their own. At the center of the hall stood a figure cloaked in robes that shimmered between reality and illusion. This was the Keeper. Their face was obscured, their presence exuding an ancient authority that demanded respect. "You seek to break the curse," the Keeper said, their voice neither male nor female, but a harmonious blend of both. "But to do so is to unravel centuries of pain and vengeance. Why should I help you?" Jack's response was heartfelt and impassioned. He spoke of the townsfolk, their endless suffering, and his belief in the possibility of redemption. He acknowledged the weight of Alaric's pain, but argued that perpetuating the cycle of suffering served no purpose. The Keeper listened in silence, their form shifting subtly, as though reflecting the emotions in Jack's words. After a long pause, the Keeper nodded. "To break the curse, you must retrieve the artifact that anchors this realm to the other," they said. "It lies deep within the Shadow Town, guarded by trials meant to test the strength of one's spirit. The path will not be easy, and the cost will be great." The Keeper guided Jack to a map etched into the stone floor of the hall. The map depicted the layout of the Shadow Town, with the artifact's location marked at its center. The Keeper's final words echoed in Jack's mind as he set out. "Only those who face their own darkness can hope to succeed." As Jack moved closer to the artifact's location, the spectral town seemed to grow darker and more oppressive. The air thickened, making each breath a struggle, and whispers filled his ears, the voices of those who had failed before him. Jack's resolve wavered, but never broke. He pressed on, determined to bring an end to the cycle of suffering that had plagued Charon's Hollow for centuries. Chapter 7. Breaking the Curse. Jack stepped into the heart of the Shadow Town, his surroundings cloaked in an eerie, otherworldly darkness. The path ahead stretched endlessly, illuminated by a faint, flickering light that seemed to emerge not from any external source, but from within himself. As he moved forward, the whispers that had followed him since entering the Shadow Town grew louder, their tones shifting from incoherent murmurs to distinct voices. Some voices pleaded desperately, urging him to turn back and abandon his quest. Others mocked him, their words dripping with venom as they predicted his inevitable failure. Jack paused for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest, but he tightened his grip on the map the Keeper had given him and pressed on, refusing to yield to the doubts clawing at his mind. The first trial awaited him in a massive courtyard, its expanse bordered by shadowy structures that seemed to shift and waver in the dim light. At the center of the courtyard stood an enormous, ornate gate, its intricate carvings pulsating faintly with dark energy. As Jack approached, 3 towering spectral guardians emerged from the shadows, their forms swirling with malevolent energy. The guardians were imposing, their very presence exuding an aura of power that sent shivers down Jack's spine. "To pass, you must answer," the first guardian intoned, its voice a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through Jack's very being. 3 riddles, 3 truths. Only then shall the gates open. The riddles were unlike anything Jack had encountered before. They tested not only his intellect but also the depths of his courage, empathy, and understanding of himself. The first guardian's riddle revolved around sacrifice, demanding that Jack recount a moment in his life when he had chosen to prioritize his work over those he loved. Jack hesitated, the memory of a missed anniversary with his late partner surfacing unbidden. He had been chasing a lead for a major story, promising to make it up later, only to realize too late that some moments could never be recovered. His voice wavered as he recounted the story, but the guardian merely nodded and stepped back. The second guardian's riddle delved into fear and guilt, forcing Jack to confront the consequences of his actions. It spoke of the stories he had written as a journalist, stories that had exposed truths but also caused harm to those involved. One particular article came to mind, a peace that had destroyed a man's career based on incomplete information. Jack had justified it at the time, telling himself the ends justified the means. But now, faced with the weight of his decisions, he admitted his regret. The second guardian's eyes, or what passed for them, seemed to soften briefly before it too stepped aside. The third and final guardian asked Jack to define redemption, challenging his understanding of forgiveness and atonement. Jack's response was slow and measured, drawn from his own journey of pain and growth. He spoke of how redemption was not about erasing one's sins, but about learning from them, striving to become better, and making amends wherever possible. The guardian's form flickered momentarily before it vanished, and the gates began to creak open, their weighty groan reverberating through the courtyard. Beyond the gates, the terrain shifted dramatically. The familiar architecture of the shadow town dissolved like smoke, replaced by a vast, desolate expanse filled with shifting sands and towering monoliths. The air here was heavy, laden with a sense of ancient sorrow and despair. Each monolith bore inscriptions that seemed to tell fragments of Alaric's story, from his rise as a powerful sorcerer to his eventual betrayal by those he had trusted. The sands themselves seemed alive, constantly shifting and erasing the inscriptions, as if to bury the past and its painful truths. Jack realized that navigating this treacherous landscape would require more than just physical endurance. He had to piece together Alaric's story by deciphering the inscriptions on the monoliths before the sands could erase them. The task was grueling, each step sinking into the ever-shifting sands as the monoliths seemed to move further away. Hours turned into days, or at least it felt that way. Time itself seemed to lose all meaning in this place, stretching and contracting like a living entity. Jack's body grew weary, his legs trembling with exhaustion, and his mind clouded by the constant whispers that seemed to rise from the sands. Yet his determination remained unbroken. Slowly but surely, he unearthed a crucial fragment of Alaric's past, the sorcerer's love for a woman named Seraphina. Alaric's devotion to her had been pure and untainted, and it was this love that had driven him to settle in Charon's Hollow. But Seraphina's death, caused by the townsfolk's betrayal, had ignited a fire of rage and despair within Alaric, ultimately fueling the curse that bound the town. Clutching the fragment of Alaric's story as though it were a lifeline, Jack pressed on until he reached the final trial. Before him loomed the spectral essence of Alaric himself, the sorcerer's image towering and imposing. Alaric's eyes burned with an unquenchable fury, their intensity piercing straight through Jack. The air around the sorcerer crackled with raw energy, and his presence was suffused with an overwhelming sense of grief and anger. "You dare to seek the end of my curse." Alaric's voice thundered, echoing across the desolate expanse. "Do you think you can undo the pain inflicted upon me?" Jack's heart pounded as he stood his ground, facing the full force of Alaric's rage. He knew that this confrontation was the culmination of everything he had endured, a final test of his resolve and his belief in the possibility of redemption. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jack began to speak, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. Chapter 8. Aftermath. Jack stood before Alaric's towering spectral form, the crystalline artifact glowing faintly in his trembling hands. The chamber around him pulsed with a strange energy, its ancient walls inscribed with runes that seemed to shimmer with each word Alaric spoke. The sorcerer's voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the cavernous space, carrying centuries of anguish and bitterness. "You carry the artifact, mortal," Alaric began, his eyes burning with unrelenting intensity. "But do you understand its cost? Do you grasp the weight of your actions and the consequences that follow?" His words seemed to reverberate not only in the chamber, but within Jack's very soul. Jack steadied himself, planting his feet firmly on the uneven ground. His voice, though soft, carried the conviction of his journey. "I do," he said, his gaze unwavering as he met Alaric's spectral eyes. and I understand the pain you've endured. But this cycle of suffering has to end. The people of Charon's Hollow, they've suffered enough. They've paid for the sins of their ancestors 100 times over. Alaric's form flickered, the rage that had defined his essence for centuries momentarily giving way to a profound sorrow. His voice softened, tinged with the weariness of ages. "They betrayed me," he said, his words heavy with grief. "They destroyed everything I held dear. My love, my home, my very soul. Why should they be forgiven for such treacheries?" Jack took a cautious step forward, the artifact in his hands glowing faintly, its light warm and soothing. "Because forgiveness is not for them alone," he said. "It's for you. This pain, this anger, it has consumed you for so long. But it doesn't have to define you. You can let it go. Let Seraphina's memory be one of love, not vengeance. Honor her by allowing her light to shine, free from the shadows of wrath and sorrow." The chamber fell silent, the weight of Jack's words hanging in the air. Alaric's form began to waver, his once imposing figure now trembling as though the foundations of his very existence had been shaken. The crystalline artifact in Jack's hands pulsed with an increasingly radiant golden light, filling the chamber with an overwhelming warmth that seemed to reach even the darkest corners. "You speak with wisdom beyond your years," Alaric said at last, his voice now filled with a quiet resignation. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps it is time to let go. If this is the end, then let it be so. May her memory shine brighter than my wrath." As Alaric's essence dissolved, his spectral form unraveling into countless tendrils of light, the artifact released a blinding flash. Jack shielded his eyes, feeling a surge of warmth and energy as the chamber seemed to quake around him. When the light subsided, the oppressive atmosphere of the chamber had lifted, replaced by a profound stillness. Jack blinked, his vision adjusting to the sudden change. He found himself standing back in the heart of Charon's Hollow. The town, once desolate and trapped in an eternal twilight, was now bathed in the soft light of dawn. The buildings, no longer ghostly remnants, stood restored to their former glory. The townsfolk emerged cautiously from their homes, their faces etched with bewilderment and tentative hope. Tears of relief and joy soon filled the square as they realized the curse had been broken. People embraced one another, their laughter and cries of happiness echoing through the town. Jack stood by the well, the artifact now a dull, lifeless crystal in his hands. Its purpose had been fulfilled, and its power extinguished. Ethel, the elderly woman who had first told Jack of the town's plight, approached him with tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You saved us all." Jack nodded, his exhaustion catching up to him as the weight of the journey settled on his shoulders. "It wasn't just me," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "It was Alaric and Seraphina. They were part of this too." In the days that followed, Charon's Hollow began to heal. The townsfolk worked together to rebuild their lives, their shared experience forging bonds that would not easily be broken. The story of the cursed town and its miraculous restoration spread far and wide, drawing visitors and scholars eager to learn the truth behind the legend. Jack's article on the vanishing town earned him the Pulitzer Prize, a recognition that brought him professional acclaim. But for Jack, the true reward lay in the lessons he carried with him. As he prepared to leave Charon's Hollow for the final time, Jack paused by the well. The memories of his journey, the trials he had faced, and the people he had met weighed heavily on his mind. He glanced at the artifact, now a simple crystal, and placed it gently on the well's edge. It no longer held power, but it served as a reminder of the sacrifices made and the lives changed. Jack climbed into his car and drove away, the road stretching endlessly before him. As he glanced in his rearview mirror, he thought he saw a figure standing by the well, watching him. Though the image was fleeting, it brought a faint smile to his lips. The keeper. Jack continued driving, the horizon filled with possibilities and the promise of new stories waiting to be uncovered.
Epilogue.
Jack never returned to Charon's Hollow, but the town remained with him always. The lessons of forgiveness, redemption, and the enduring power of stories shaped the rest of his life. He often found himself reflecting on Alaric and Seraphina, their love and pain etched into the fabric of the town's history. Though the Keeper and Alaric faded into legend, Jack knew their spirits endured, their story now a part of something greater. Years later, as Jack sat at his desk, penning another tale, he glanced at a photo he had taken of Charon's Hollow's restored square. The image was a testament to resilience and hope, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal and sorrow, there was always the possibility of redemption. And in the quiet moments of his life, when the world seemed still, Jack sometimes felt the faintest whisper of the Keeper's presence, a subtle but enduring connection to the town that had forever changed him. Thank you for diving into our incredible stories. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures. This is just the beginning. There's so much more to come.